The first speaker is Dr. Jeremy Hanna, and he will talk about the decade of action of the Cryosphere.
So hi everyone, yeah, I've got 5 minutes to talk about a decade's worth of stuff, so strap in. I'm going to introduce the International Decade of Action for Cryospheric Sciences, so science and action for a melting world. And I'm hoping this is something that everyone here can get behind. And when I say everyone, I mean scientists, obviously, but also social scientists, political scientists, indigenous people, storytellers, and especially any funders in the room who might have really deep pockets, if such people exist. So I don't need to remind you all, we've seen this over the past few days, that the cryosphere is in crisis. But what we perhaps forget when we're looking at the technicalities of how the cryosphere works is there's a very simple reason for this. And that is that greenhouse gases emissions have sharply risen since the Industrial Revolution, primarily due to the burning of fossil fuels. And this has already led to 1.3 degrees of warming, and that warming is stronger in the regions where the cryosphere exists, in the mountains and in the higher latitudes in the Arctic and the Antarctic. And therefore, we should not think about climate change and cryosphere loss as something that's happening in the distant future, but something that's happening now. And we can see this wherever we look throughout the cryosphere. The facts we've covered over the past few days. We're losing our ice sheets, leading to sea level rise. Sea ice is disappearing. We're losing snow and glaciers, which is affecting our water resources from mountains. And we're losing permafrost crumbling beneath our feet. So we know this, but we often don't think about, as scientists especially, what this means, the catastrophe that this is for our societies. It's going to and is leading to the loss of cultural capital, infrastructure, and livelihoods. We're going to see sea level rise and potential shutdown of big ocean circulation systems. And this is all going to lead to mass migration and ecosystem damage, so massive political problems that we're going to see ourselves facing. So we need to change, and we need to make sure our voices, as those who care about the cryosphere, are heard. And we can do this through this decade of action for cryospheric sciences. And this decade came about from a UN resolution in 2024. So it has legal backing in international courts and has already led to this International Year of Glacier Preservation. So a bunch of us have been working on what we should do throughout this decade, and we came up with a synthesis document that will hopefully be published soon. And we came up with this vision for the decade, and that is to transform cryospheric science into an inclusive, decision-ready intelligence that enables societies to anticipate, manage, and adapt to cryosphere loss. So we need to do that whilst we also fight for every degree of global warming to limit that cryosphere loss. And I won't read all of this out, but we came up with 5 overarching challenges, each of which has 3 main goals. So we need to coordinate and improve our observations in this first overarching challenge. We need to make our predictions actionable for decision makers. We need to come up with risk management solutions, looking at hazards and the other risks posed by cryospheric change. We need to coordinate knowledge on how to adapt to cryospheric loss and come up with techniques and plans for that. And we need to amplify the voice of cryospheric science for politicians, education, and the general public. And the idea is that we bring all of this together into this Cryosphere intelligence platform so that we can combine data, model, policy relevance all together into one platform. And if you're not already motivated to contribute to this cryospheric decade, I'll read out this quote from the synthesis document. There will be no second chance. The decade of action on the cryospheric sciences is the moment to safeguard the cryosphere for every generation to come. So hopefully that gets you pumped up to contribute to the decade of science, cryospheric science. I hope so, because I wrote that. So. And if you want to find out more, we have a website on the UN that will be populated with more and more stuff over the coming days. And I hope that many of you can join us in Paris for the technical launch of the decade on the 19th and 20th of March. So thank you very much.
Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Gerlis Fugmann, and she will talk about Arctic research priorities for the next decade.
Thank you very much. Joining you really from the Arctic, traveling here from the other side of the planet, so it's great to be here in New Zealand. I'm going to be talking about Arctic research planning for the next decade, and this is a question that we within IASC, the International Arctic Science Committee that I represent, are asking ourselves every 10 years. So since 1995, we've been regularly convening with a lot of other partners a process called ICARP, the International Conference on Arctic Research Planning. It always leads to a conference. This is why there's conference in the title, but it does ultimately is a process. It's a consultation process that's leading into one main event, and then there are some outcomes that will be presented and hopefully then taken up by the community. So the first one was in 1995. The second one leading up to a conference in Denmark, and that really drove the creation of 11 science plans that were then translated into projects that were done during the last IPY in 2007-2008. The third ICARP was is essentially what IASC is operating on at the moment, with a consensus statement that was created on what are the important research needs for the next decade and a roadmap for research priorities. And for this fourth ICARP, the current one that we are running, we brought together 26 international scientific, indigenous, and educational organizations. CliC is one of the partners, as well as SCAR and several other organizations. It was a community-wide undertaking that we ran from 2022 to this year, 26, really involving Arctic researchers, indigenous peoples, policymakers, residents, and stakeholders from around the world to really look at what are the major needs and priorities in Arctic research in the next decade up until 2035. But we didn't want to come up with just a list of questions. We wanted to see how can these be actually implemented. So including recommendations for implementation. Who should implement them? How should they be implemented? What requirements are needed for implementation when it comes to funding, infrastructure, and data needs? But also, how can we track the implementation over the next 10 years so that we know within IPY and others these recommendations are taken up? So we started the process and invited really everyone within the Arctic research community to contribute in a consultation phase in 23 and 24, with contributing projects, documents, results, consultation events, and others. And then in 24, we formed 7 so-called research priority teams. And these research priority teams were open to anyone who wanted to contribute. So as a self-nomination process, we wanted to make sure there's a wide range of career levels involved, good representation also from indigenous peoples. And so we had in the end about 200 members, or more than 200 members on these research priority teams from 28 different countries. The teams were formed along the themes that you can see listed here, with the first 3 coming out of the recommendations of the ICARP 3 process, so the last ICARP process, and then several other themes on issues that we wanted to address separately, because they are urgent issues, and this is Arctic science diplomacy, indigenous-led methodologies, co-creation of research, but also educational issues. And so these teams have been also populated by the Arctic Data Committee to ensure that data needs are included. What we did then is the teams worked on their results essentially and introduced their preliminary results during the major ICARP 4 summit that we held in Boulder, Colorado last year with about 1,200 participants, and they consulted on these priorities with the participants. And we're now in the process of finalizing them, and we hope to publish the results in about a month and a half time at the ASSW in Aarhus in Denmark. It'll be 1 final ICARP results, then 7 detailed reports from each of the research priority teams with a long list of content. and then as well as a summary for policymakers and a call for action for funders. I can't go into details for all the results that are coming out there, because each of the teams had to narrow down to 5 priorities, and then for each of them create implementation actions and so on. So it's a really detailed document that you will find. But I encourage you to keep an eye out when this is published, and we'll talk more. This will be then hopefully taken up now within the process of the International Polar Year into projects and initiatives within the Arctic. And for that one, I'm going to also lead over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Gary Wilson.
Kia ora again, folks. I'm the SCAR president, but this is a bit of a collective talk. IPY 5 Executive Committee includes SCAR, it includes IASC, it includes WMO, and it includes the International Science Council. So there might be a bit of SCAR flavour to it, but it's quite a few groups working together. What's going to be different? The key thing in here is it's daunting and exciting at the same time. It's only 25 years since the last one, and it was 50 years since the one before it. That is because we're changing the focus up. Previous IPYs are focused on exploration and discovery a lot, and building the teams and the capability, but this one is responding to an increasingly rapid rates of change. We need action, and we need to focus in on what we need that will result in that action. So that's what's going to be a bit different about IPY 5. So this is not just the nice to have, this is the must have. And that's what we're focusing in on. We're also responding to the geopolitical situation. We need to drive global collaboration, so that's really part of it. We need to change the economically driven short-termism in the short-term view, and we need to focus on the need for a more resilient and predictable future. So what does that really mean? Now, here's my starter for 8, not for 10, but for 8. This is shamelessly cribbed from the work done by the Visioning and Priorities Task Force for IPY 5. Some of those people are in the room, so I acknowledge you don't have time to go through all the names. And it's my kind of take on it. This is what we're looking for. We're looking for science that leads to action. I've already stated that, really. Generating new knowledge that leads to impact and solutions. We're looking for evidence-based narratives that develop trust in science. Trust in science is more important now than it's ever been. But our challenge is, how do we engage the non-scientists in the priorities? How do we listen to their priorities and do some translating here? Because we've been giving them data and facts and been scientists for long enough now, and it's not working. So let's change that up a bit. Addressing important issues in a sustainable way, holistic rather than linear solutions. So this is about what we actually do that makes a long-term difference, not what we might do as a band-aid. Ocean climate and ecosystem monitoring, gathering the data that will lead to better and wider understanding. We know that monitoring helps. If people see trends and trends in data sets and changes, then that actually gets them thinking about the fact that things are changing. Broadening into the disciplinary engagement in the polar regions, not just geophysics, but also social sciences and humanities, etc. Globally collaborative effort, I've already spoken to that. This is a global problem that requires a global solution. Certainly elevating Indigenous voices. In many cases, the Indigenous peoples are at the front line and the forefront, and they better understand the challenges than many, and we need to have them as central to this, and elevating the new practitioners. This is an intergenerational challenge. I'm standing up here now, but I won't be the one dealing with this after the next IPY. I do hope to be still working on it when the next IPY comes, but we need the early career folks thinking and stepping into the breach here. The time is now. There's not there's not a lot of time. This is a long time frame. You've seen this diagram for a while. We're already in 2026, and IPY 5 is in 2032 to 33. It is upon us. So that's something you need to pay attention to. There are plenty of questions out there. So we will make a call shortly for science and research programs and ideas to respond to this vision and priorities. And we're looking for ideas that will be spooling up, conducting fieldwork, or analysing and delivering results. So we're keen to leverage off things that are already being thought about and started up. And we're looking for a wide range of projects at scale and scope. Some large, some smaller. But there will still be a few constraints in terms of being an IPY program, like involving a certain number of countries and disciplines and responding to these visions and priorities that we've articulated. So yes, as I said, 2030-32 is not that far away. Sorry, 2032-33 is not that far away. After this morning, I can tell you it already may be too late for the Thwaites ice shelf. So that kind of prompts me to say, the pressure is now. Don't wait 5 years to get going on this. We need to be using that as our goal to spool things up even sooner and get going, because time is not on our side. So with that, I will finish and pass it on before I do get carried off. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Professor Petra Heil, and she will be talking about Antarctica InSync.
Thanks, Flo. So hopefully most of you here have heard about Antarctica InSync even before this conference, but we thought it would be good to bring you up to recent developments. So over the last few months, we have seen especially the white paper writing meeting in Frascati. And we have now 7 themes which are outlined here just in their caption, ranging from the ocean, deep ocean, the rapid decline of Antarctic sea ice, melting ice sheets, Antarctic life from land to the deep sea, anthropogenic change, aerosols, radiative feedbacks, clouds, and then encompassing climate variability. If you haven't subscribed and you're interested, go to the InSync webpage or scan this QR code to get a newsletter. And if you're interested to interact with any of those themes, they have all individual email groups, so please go on the webpage and sign up. As I mentioned, we had a white paper writing workshop in early November. The white papers in last draft form are out at the moment on the SCAR portal, and comments close in the middle of February. So if you haven't looked at them, please have a look, and there is a feedback form for you to leave comments for each theme, for each of the white papers. We also have now undertaken grouping and information uptake of what support is available. This here is led by the RINGS group, the aviation or airborne support, and what's planned and how it will be realized. We distinguish between fixed-wing helicopter and drone. Similarly, we have a list of station, land, or traverse capability. What is there, typically by station or a field campaign, who is providing it, and how we can engage, and what is committed already by existing project funding, or what's still an ambition. And then we have the same also in the marine sphere, where we know about committed or planned shipping undertakings across the different timelines. So as you can see, there is still a lot of work to be done in those orange lines, similar here across all the 3 realizations. So we continuously work across the 26 national programs that have joined Antarctica InSync so far to provide a portfolio around Antarctica InSync. We also very much encourage everyone to get active, and recently SCAR has approved an Antarctica InSync action group that aims to bring the different SCAR initiatives together around the focal period 27 to 29 to really collaborative work and explore the synchronous undertaking of this initiative. And working groups really should sit ideally, as shown here, between multiple of those 7 themes. So if there's a color spot, then a proposed working group or an accepted working group has been identified to sit between 2 or more of the themes, and that's really the collaborative nature that we plan for under Antarctica InSync. So far, 11 working groups have been approved. So my call to all of you is to either join one of the existing ones or build a team to come up with your own cross-theme working groups to work on tangible contributions towards this initiative, which is just sitting 4 years before the IPY that Gary just talked to. And lastly, the outcomes. We really strive with the impacts team to take the outcomes in the spirit of the larger programs to our user. And so we really put a lot of effort in identifying where the different themes will deliver and how they actually can be reflected to have global benefits. A lot of that sits at the moment still with smaller entities. For example, in the pollution environmental protection, we have been able to identify quite streamlined connections to our stakeholders. However, in the bigger pictures, it's much harder to identify them clearly. So we need a lot of more work, and we already heard earlier in the week some of the societal and policy challenges around that. And lastly, please all work with your different national or cross-national funding agencies to bring Antarctica InSync as a real prototype of the next IPY together, to coordinate Antarctic research, with you to reduce climate and ecosystem risk, and really to strengthen the global cooperation, because we heard during this week, and we know even without that times are really critical at the moment. Not only we have a rapid change, but we also have the geopolitical landscape change under our legs, and so it's really important for us to work together and bring something that is impactful and gets reflected. So we understand the Antarctic Southern Ocean better, but we also take the message out and make it a global phenomenon. So thank you.
Okay, our last speaker is Dr. Narelle van der Waal, and she will be talking about WMO research priorities.
Well, after all of those amazing initiatives and projects, it's just an honour to be here and to talk alongside my colleagues. The WMO, what I'm going to talk about today, is really looking at how we support all these different initiatives and projects to really, deal with some of the things that Jeremy was just talking about, these very urgent problems that we're facing. And right now here in this, all the research community is really very key to a lot of the things that we are trying to do collectively going forward. I really just wanted to start by explaining about WMO's mission. It's really to facilitate worldwide cooperation on monitoring and predicting changes in weather, climate, water, and other environmental conditions. And we do this through a number of ways, through international standards, data exchange, services, training, and through coordinating research as well. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Again, going back to what Jeremy was showing, this crisis that we're facing in the cryosphere, snow, ice, glaciers, permafrost, sea, affect weather patterns, climate services, water resources and hazards. They influence sea level, freshwater availability, extreme events, and long-term climate feedbacks. And when we talk about WMO's work in the cryosphere, I just wanted to show you these 4 ambitions that were established a couple of years ago that really, explain what WMO is trying to achieve. The first one is about being prepared for changes in the cryosphere, for the impacts that are going to come. And also thinking about working collaboratively to limit and reduce loss and those impacts. Looking at the data, the science, including Indigenous knowledge, and making these accessible and open access, and making sure that they're relative for policy making, for decision making worldwide. and the importance of the cryosphere and its consequences and its changes are understood to inspire action. And that goes to what Gary was just saying and his, talking about the IPY really wanting to go from science to action. So I just wanted to highlight that WMO is huge, and I was looking at all these initiatives. I was asked to comment on WMO's initiatives, and there's actually quite a lot. So I've only just picked a few here that are most relevant to the research community. I mean, the very first one is very dear to my heart, the World Climate Research Programme. Until the start of this year, I was in the Secretariat for the WCRP. And it should be dear to your heart too, because the leading cryosphere program in that is CliC. Without that, you would not all be here today. So I think you know a bit about CliC now and the amazing research that we've been hearing about at this conference. We have other research projects within WCRP as well. There's quite a few, but I've only picked out one extra one here, Global Energy and Water Exchanges, GWEX, which a number of you will probably sort of know about, connecting cryosphere processes to the global water cycle, energy cycle, and strengthening understanding of water availability. And this is where its fundamental cryosphere science shapes international research priorities and contributes to global assessments and climate services. The second one here is a sister program we have called the World Weather Research Program, which is looking more at operational forecasting and links to research. And I just wanted to highlight Daniela's here somewhere. You can talk to her about PCAPs, Polar Coupled Analysis and Prediction for Services, strengthening coupled atmosphere-ocean ice prediction in polar regions, and improving service delivery. This is really a pathway from research to improve forecast, hazard warning, practical services for communities affected by cryospheric change. Lastly, or thirdly at least, atmospheric composition. We have the Global Atmosphere Watch, and this is providing sort of long-term quality-controlled observations of greenhouse gases, aerosols, and reactive gases. These observations are essential for understanding the cryosphere feedbacks, including black carbon deposition on snow and ice and greenhouse gas emissions from thawing permafrost. For researchers, this provides a global data backbone to ensure consistency across those observing systems. Finally, cryosphere observations, and I've just picked out two here which I think are key. The first one is the Global Cryosphere Watch, which coordinates observations of snow primarily at the moment, but working on mechanisms to include data on glaciers, sea ice, permafrost, lake and river ice, and promoting standards and best practice across networks. And then complementing this, we've got the Global Climate Observing System, defines essential climate variables, including cryosphere components, ensuring that observations meet climate monitoring requirements. Together, these help to ensure that the cryosphere observations are sustained, standardised and fit for purpose, underpinning projections, services and policy decisions. And really the aim is going to be to support these things like the IPY coming up so that we have very solid standards and very clear ways of sharing data so that the entire research community can benefit. Thank you.
Okay, so are there any questions from the floor, actually?
What's your perspective on climate solutions / geoengineering? Because that's not really been even mentioned over the last 4 days.
Yeah, I can answer that from the perspective of the decade on cryospheric science. In the background document behind that, we explicitly outrule any unproven, dangerous geoengineering experiments. So that mirrors my own opinion as well. Does anyone else want to talk about geoengineering?
Just really quickly from the IASC side, we have been asking ourselves that question, essentially, how do we treat this? It does become more and more prominent also within the Arctic, obviously. So from the IASC side, we have decided to actually create an action group on geoengineering to actually look at this topic a little bit in more detail and see also how we as an organization should respond to this. This action group
is just starting its work. We're looking forward to actually seeing what's coming out of this, and I'm happy to report back once the action group has actually made some results.
Gary, would you like to say something for Antarctica? I mean, I'm not forcing you, but...
So, from an IPY perspective, we've simply looked at it and said we actually want long-term sustainable solutions, not short-term band-aids. So we've got to look at this more holistically than simply one-off actions that geoengineering are proposing. But with respect to it from a SCAR and Antarctic perspective, we took a paper to the treaty saying that actually, unless it met the criteria of being safe and proven, etc., then we wouldn't support it.
Okay. That's okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, another question here. Thank you very much.
Thanks. This just picks up on something Rob was talking about this morning about low probability, high impact events. I think that was the phrase he used. And how we can get policymakers to pay attention to the future, the future disasters, perhaps we could call them, or the possibility of extreme events. And I heard a talk recently by somebody, a social scientist, who was talking about terrorism and made the point that most governments have a plan, even though it's a very low probability event, to address an attack, a terrorist attack. And so they've got that concept in their policy that there might be, it's a very low chance there's a terrorist attack, sort of a 9/11 kind of attack, but they have a plan. It's part of the DNA of the government, and somehow we have to raise that similar level of concern about environmental issues that are unlikely, but if they happen, are potentially catastrophic or at least economically disastrous. So I wonder what the panel thinks about that or strategy for engaging politicians.
Thanks, Ray. I'm not sure we're going to go quite that strong, because as soon as you put communities in alarmism, it usually leads to inaction, not action. I think there's clear paths forward, and if we can demonstrate those, and we have frameworks coming through where that could, those frameworks can allow us to explore solutions that have positive consequences and can really, bring enthusiasm and positivity to the conversation. I think that's the way forward, not fear and anxiety over these, possible problems.
Just to add to that, I think that's why I said at the beginning of my talk, we need lots of different voices involved. As scientists, who most people in this room are, we're not trained to talk to politicians. We're not trained to communicate what our findings really mean to the public so well. Many of us do that laudably, but we're trained to look at little equations and look at graphs, and we get buried in that, and we don't think about the consequences all the time. So we need all these different voices to help get the cryosphere and climate change more broadly onto the political agenda. I don't know if we need a specific disaster planning on every government, but we need the cryosphere definitely talked about by politicians.
Yeah, it's a really good question, and made me think for a moment. I mean, we have struggled because the nature of climate change has been so insidious, and it's been difficult to get it on the agenda. But there's a really interesting example unfolding in New Zealand now, which is the outbreak of dengue fever again, which is because of climate change. The mosquitoes are travelling further down south into the country, and so maybe things like that will help us get it back on the agenda, and maybe get to the point of actually people understanding they need to deal with it. Interestingly, when it comes to defence and Five Eyes and things like that, they do have these things in place and they are taking this very seriously. So at the defence level they are, not at the government level yet, but I think we're getting there.
Yeah, I agree with what has been said, but I think we should also remember that we often that we work within a national framework, and so we have seen increasingly countries calling out national climate risk assessments, and I think this is really where we can bring the information and the data that we collect in our different research areas and bring them together and make them relevant to the country or the region where we live in. And it once it's on a risk register, I think then we have the pathway to have open communication, and where we also can bridge from the science to the information, and then to actually decision making that low-lying infrastructure or whatever. So, and it's very important for us to communicate also in terms of risk, likelihood, and the timeline that's associated with it, to be very clear about that.
Yeah, and just keeping in mind that we have, especially with the IPY as well as with the UN Decade of Action on Cryospheric Sciences, two major international mechanisms where we can really raise this topic and also include governments and make sure that this is being put on the agenda, but also using already existing mechanisms, for example, for us in the Arctic with the Arctic Council and its working groups and the assessments that are being done, and actually strengthening this and their work. And I think all of this will hopefully make sure this is being raised and put on the agenda.
Thank you. There is a question there.
Kia ora. Can I just, first of all, say thank you very much to all of you who have presented here, and for all of you who have come to New Zealand to share your knowledge, for all of you who have presented. And I arrived here on Sunday to hear this panel. And I didn't know that until now. I've been waiting all week for this message, because I'm a social scientist working in my community to solve problems. And New Zealand is a climate change problem. It's not just a little part of it or this part or that part. Our whole country is vulnerable, as you all know. And so I'm going to take back so much information, but so much of what I've heard was completely inaccessible. I have no ability to relate any of it back to any kind of tangible solution that will help my community to be safe. And it would have been amazing, and this is something to think about for the future, to start with you guys and then tag your actions, your suggestions, your advice back to the research that's been done, so that it's useful for actually creating solutions in communities and changing real lives. So I just want to say thank you to all of you. But we need solutions. The world needs solutions. And the solutions to the big problems that are literally killing people, taking away livelihoods, and destroying the planet sit in this room. And that's a huge burden of responsibility. And I thank you for the commitment that you have made to being part of that change. Kia ora.
Thank you very much. I have a question for the panel. It's an easy question. Yeah, an easy question. Okay, so it's about, so there are multiple international initiatives that are great, and you have been definitely showing the willingness of the community to open to different horizons and consider multidisciplinary collaboration beyond science and go to social science. So my question is, how do you ensure that you make the most of all those initiatives and avoid a bit the overlaps? So, I mean, how do you think all can come together?
In one sense, it's actually really easy, because the scale of the problem is so enormous. There is little that we're going to fight over, and a lot that we're agreeing on. And so we are finding ways, such as IPY is definitely looking to leverage many of these other things that are happening as well, and try and bring it together more globally, if you like, than simply just one region focus. So there are ways that we're certainly looking to do it. And the fact that we're sitting on the stage together means we're constantly working together to make sure we know how to do this. And even to the extent of activities that the WMO are undertaking, we're making sure we're connected up there as well. So that's what we're doing to ensure it. But I just thought, while I had the stage for a moment, I'd respond to that last comment from the floor. So there are some tools available through things like the Antarctic Environments Portal, where we work quite hard to make the science accessible for policymakers. And the very people in this room are writing those articles as well as the scientific peer-reviewed articles to help ensure that we are translating the science that we can to get it policy ready at least. So there are some places available, and for Antarctica that's one of them, but maybe my colleagues will speak to others as we answer the question.
I can go next. And on accessibility, I think WMO also has the State of the Climate reports, which try and condense down, a lot of the information into things that can be understood for policymakers. We also contribute to a lot of the other international sort of policy, initiatives like. To do with like things like the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. And others as well. I think just to highlight as well, the World Climate Research Programme has just started a policy brief initiative. So I think we're going to have a bit more of those, aren't we, Tim? And going back to Flo's question, I'm actually really encouraged by the amount of collaboration that we have around these initiatives. I know all these people very well. We work together. We try, especially in the current climate where there's not a lot of funding and resources, to really be smart about how we're collaborating. We try and work really, really closely together to make sure that we all take a part and not, step on toes or anything like that. It's not like that right now. It's more, how can we work together to make the most of the resources that we have and bring them together to really, really, make something happen. I don't know, I think that's our experience. Here this week, Gerlis and I are in another meeting. We're coming back and forth because we're trying to set priorities for the WMO as well at the same time. And a couple of weeks ago, I was at the British Antarctic Survey with Petra, trying to do something. It's just ongoing and really making an effort to ensure that we are all on the same page and we know how we're going to go forward.
Yeah, I think none of us wants to reinvent the wheel. We want to strengthen each of our initiatives. I think that's the key thing. And this is why early communication, making sure that we all work with each other, represented on each other's initiatives and boards, and see how we can just use each other's activities to strengthen science and to the attention on our regions, on the polar regions in this case for us within the Arctic. So that's very important. And I also want to quickly mention for the earlier question, education as well as outreach is a huge focus also as part of our ICAR process, and really strengthening communication as well as educational programs about the polar regions is a huge, we have a specific research priority team just on that topic that is coming up with some recommendations to make sure that communities are involved, that you can translate these results back and they understand why it's so important that we research essentially the polar regions. And so I think that's something where hopefully also some good resources will be developed also as part of the International Polar Year.
To answer the question, all these different things that are happening, that's an opportunity for us as cryospheric scientists and people that care about the cryosphere to coordinate in a time when there's not a lot of funding around and there's not a lot of stability in the world, to really focus what we have. And we do keep talking to each other in that way, so I'll mirror everything everyone's just said. The decade from that point of view, previous international decades in other disciplines have been really transformative. So if we think back to the international hydrology decade, that really transformed hydrology. So there's really a chance to bring quite a lot of things together under an international decade that has the weight of international law, if that means anything anymore. To answer to respond to the comment over there, which was very nice to hear, working with social scientists, from my experience, yes, we can provide them with facts and figures, and we need to keep doing that and simplifying messages. But also we need to work together more and form questions together and work with communities, and that takes money and that takes time. It takes a lot of time. I've first-hand experience of this working with social scientists. They speak a different language, and we speak a different language to them. So that sitting down in rooms and having interdisciplinary funding is also key to coming up with solutions to cryospheric loss.
Okay, let's go.
There is not a lot, but there's a lot to add. So thanks to all four. For me, with the Antarctica InSync especially, I think it was so marvelous to see how the community in this so-called bottom-up driven initiative is really working together. And I think what really makes it impossible to duplicate much is the implementation. I mean, I showed those marine science and other resources. There's so few resourcing for us to do research in the field, at the sea and so on. So that's really a regulating mechanism. And so now seeing these not only binational or multinational, but really cross-national initiatives is marvelous. You know, it has grown so much from my IPY4 experience, where it was often like 2 or 3 nations getting together and doing something. And also, yes, thanks for the comment. I believe nationally, and the funding will actually drive us in the science to work very much closer with the different user groups for our information. So societal input or governmental input, regulatory bodies telling us and guiding us from the outset how to shape our science. That will be what we will see over the next decades. There's no doubt about that. So I think we will merge our languages together, hopefully soon.
Thank you very much. So on all those hope message and optimism, I think we will close this panel and move to the way forward.
Before we invite the panelists up, in this closing last session is really going to be about you and your input. I just, Ray, could you stand up for a second so everyone knows who you are? Ray Bradley. I'm having Ray stand up because just for all of your awareness, Ray and I had a crazy idea about 7 years ago to try to bring the CliC IPO, International Projects Office, to the United States. We had great federal government support for climate science 7 years ago, 5 years ago. And you know, I want to thank Ray. He's been just an incredible partner in this. But I really want to just make a shout out to the CliC IPO staff. Megan Taylor's here. Katie Quigley is back in Amherst. Keith Alverson, the current executive director of CliC, for all of this. Really incredible. And none of this could have happened without really deep, genuine, sincere, committed support from our hosts here in Wellington. Tim Naish deserves a big call out for helping make this conference a reality. And it has, I don't know about all of you, but I'm just blown away. It has been totally beyond our wildest expectations, I think. And so I thank all of you for coming and being here and being part of this. So I applaud all of you. And thank you, Ray. This has been really great. So I'm going to call up, I think, Georgia. Georgia, are you still here? Georgia Grant? Tamban? Yao? Tendong? Can you come up to the stage one more time today? And Alex Aves, could you each just introduce yourselves briefly, where you're from?
Kia ora koutou, I am Georgia Grant. I work at the newly formed Earth Sciences New Zealand, which is a geology, climate, atmosphere and meteorology Crown organisation, government organisation in New Zealand, just up the road. And I work on reconstructing sea level and ice sheets from the past to try and understand what some of those broader constraints and climate forcings and responses are.
Hi, I'm Emily Gyeongjin from Korea Polar Research Institute. I'm a principal research scientist working on Cryospheric modeling, and right now I have working on to the two projects about. One is for Antarctic sea ice, and the other one is Arctic sea ice, actually. And then I'm also act as a director of Department of Policy and Partnership of COFRI right now.
Hi, my name is Tamban Melot. I'm the director of the National Center for Polar and Ocean Research in India. I'm also involved with this CliC scientific steering group. So we just had the meeting on Sunday, and I've been not in action here because actually we also have another meeting in WMO's Polar and High Mountain Observations, Research and Services. That's still going on till tomorrow. And it's been very exciting days to meet a lot of people, in fact, and fantastically organized. So thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Tēnā koutou katoa. My name's Alex Aves. I am a recent PhD graduate at the University of Canterbury. I'm technically unemployed at the moment, but because I have recently finished. But my own work looks in the plastic space, so I've always done research kind of observing aerosol and nanoplastics and cryospheric micro and nanoplastics. But I'm also up here today as kind of an ECR representative, as I'm the current president of Apex Oceania, as well as being kind of co-coordinator for the Apex Polar Plastic Group, and yeah, being involved in the wider ECR kind of Apex world as well.
My name is Yao Taidong from Chinese Circumstances, the special institute called the Institute of Tibetan Plateau Research. I'm working on the glaciers in the Tibetan Plateau and the surroundings. Thank you.
So just hang on to that. So, you know, the purview of CliC as part of the WCRP is to both support the broad community, our broad cryosphere community, and working in all the components and aspects of the cryosphere, but to advance science through scientific coordination and to advocate for example, early career folks, and to support the growth of the next generation of superstars in this work, but with the broader goal of helping and supporting the IPCC, the UNFCCC, and the WMO. So really and we're gonna try not to keep everyone here hostage very long, but we thought this would be a really wonderful opportunity. We're thinking about the future of CliC now. We're going to be going through a reboot in terms of a funding cycle for CliC. I think, as you all know, it's a very challenging time, very much so in the United States for the support of science and climate science broadly. We're going to have to be creative about supporting all of our science. There are new geopolitical challenges in international collaboration like we haven't seen before, adding another layer of complexity to all of this. So really, I'm going to be up here taking notes. We have some opportunities to interact with policymakers, philanthropists who are interested in supporting the kinds of science that we do in the coming weeks and months. And so we wanted to be equipped with all of your great ideas as we go into thinking about the future of CliC, how it might play a role in the next IPY. So I'd like to begin maybe with Emily. Would you like to maybe just make a few comments about some of the key things that happened here for you, sources of inspiration here at the meeting, and where you see that we maybe could have done something different or better in a context of thinking about sort of planning for the future.
Okay, actually, I'm writing down something about this meeting and the future. Serving as a member of organizing committee of inaugural session of CliC Open Science Conference in this time has been a very eye-opening opportunity for me. And this conference has, I think, achieved something very remarkable. It has crystallized the link between high-level climate sciences and its regional impacts and the urgent policy responses required. So we have moved beyond merely observing the ice melt. We are now discussing the survival of ecosystems and then stability of global sciences, society actually. So I'm particularly encouraged to encouragement from the to see the rising engagement from Asia, including my home country, Korea, which signaled that the Cryosphere is no longer a distant concern, but a shared global responsibility. So, however, as we celebrate our progress, we must address a sobering reality. As just you said, like, despite the scientific clarity we possess, the global attention really span is fragmented. Today, we find that the existential urgency of climate change is increasingly competing with other massive global affairs, like, for instance, like the rapid and noise advancement of artificial intelligence and the other emerging technologies is capturing the public interest and political capital. So while these innovations are transformative, we must be vigilant. We cannot allow the novelty of new trend to diminish the focus on the reality of our warming globe. So in some parts of the world, the climate research is already suffering, not just for a lack of funding, but from the lack of visibility, I think. So as a Cryosphere scientist, maybe our challenge is no longer just data problem, it is an attention problem. We must ensure that the melting of our pores remains more headline-worthy than the latest algorithm, I think. And this is precisely why the fifth IPY, Gerlis said, is more than just a scientific milestone, I think. It must be a strategic intervention, and the IPY is our platform to reclaim the narrative. So it is our opportunity to synchronize our national research programs into a powerful, unified global voice that cannot be ignored. So, but for this work, we cannot, operate in silos. The synergy between nations must be seamless, and we need to prepare not just for better data collection, but for the better international collaborations that transcend the geopolitical and technological distractions. So also another critical part of the synergy is the active cultivation of an environment where early career researcher can thrive. And I think the young scientists entering our field today are the ones who will really help to navigate the world of the competing priorities. So they are the one who will bridge the gap between traditional field science and then the digital age. So we have a duty to ensure they are not just invited to sit in the back of the room, but are given the resource and the leadership roles to drive the VIPS IPY. So their energy and fresh perspective are exactly what we need to break through the global noise. So finally, Korea is also ready to stand at the forefront of this effort. So COPRI is committed to participating actively in the international disclosures, sharing our infrastructure, and supporting the growth of young polar scientists. So we do not want to be just a participant, we want to be a bridge, the bridge between the current challenges and the future solutions. So I just finally want to say, like, let us leave the Wellington, not just with new data, but with a renewed commitment to keep the cryosphere at the heart of the global agenda. That's it.
Wow, thank you, Amelia. Georgia.
All right. Yes, things at the top of mind from this week, which is probably going to be quite a journey for all of us together. One thing that I keep coming back to is how certain is useful, and how much more certain is more useful. In presentations on future climate scenarios, speakers identified, our decisions on emission pathways as the number one contribution to uncertainty. And then climate forcing. We still have some really outstanding points of unknowns of how the climate system functions. And I think sometimes focusing on improving what we do know can be a distraction. So this is really just a call to remind ourselves that whilst the unknown can be scary, those are really the things that we need to know more about, rather than reducing the uncertainty on things that we do know. Jacob mentioned something earlier in the week about what is most vulnerable, prioritising some of those sites and data records that are going to be lost very soon for a number of reasons, whether that's sea level rise or ice melt. A lot of that coastal margin is going to be gone, and we're not going to be able to get those records back. And so thinking about those kind of science priorities, but obviously what is most vulnerable, our coastline, our infrastructure, our people, we really need to be focused on that exact point. Anything else is, again, a bit of a distraction. And part of that is using what we have. I really encourage everybody to prove that they can't answer new science questions with old data. Going and collecting new data is a logistical nightmare in Antarctica at the moment. It is warm, it is wet. We do not really know how to function in those polar environments when it's wet. We know how to do it when it's dry and cold. So I think we really need to start thinking about how climate change is going to impact our ability to be in the field. And lastly, I want to think about how we define success. This is both how we define science research in a really specific way so that we can measure that completion of work. I think we have, I guess similar to the first point, a focus on continuing down a pathway and just seeking more knowledge about that point. We really need to be able to finish something and move forward onto the next thing as a community and build on that knowledge. But also within our careers in research, we're increasingly asked to deliver outcomes for society. And we know that this pathway is not through publishing inaccessible manuscripts, but it's our key measure for personal success. It's impossible to create science-based solutions for society when we're measured by our peers and not the people. So I think, again, just, success is not measured by the individual achievement, but when the community thrives. Non-traditional outcomes really need to have more emphasis in our ways of measuring success. Tēnei te mihi.
Thanks, Georgia. Tom Bond.
Thanks, Rob, for that loud thinking. But I'm quite an optimist in the sense that it required 30 years, 3 decades for a CliC from its beginning to have an open science conference, and that's been an enormous success. And thanks to you, Ray, and Keith, and all Tim, all these people here. So in fact, we are already in a very low budget kind of situation than we were actually much more would have been for the climate science in the past. We could not do that then. Because the reason is that actually the societal, thoughts about it, the cryosphere and losing cryosphere is much higher compared to that was in the past. It's just not necessarily you need to only think about the climate part of it actually, which is that where you all, some of us land in trouble. But if you look at the water security and the hazards involved, actually, I think, in fact, if I look from the viewpoint of a country of about 1.4 billion, actually, it's never been easier to convince a government than now, because of the simple reason, actually, that the implications or the things are real out in the very obvious, like. The extreme, the weather systems which we face now, especially extreme rainfalls, I'm able to convince to some of the people, even a local government at the at the state or in the coastal state down south in India now, because they have seen the extreme weather, and then the scientists are able to, when they are telling them this is nothing to do only what happens here, what is basically losing Arctic sea ice is something which is the teleconnection, what we see some of this rainfall and extremes. And up in the north, actually, we have been seeing extremely gulfs, the glacial lake outburst floods, the landslides, and the permafrost thawing issues and all, which is out in the real field compared to that in the past. So my feeling is actually that even if you don't connect entirely with the climate change is the problem, but the real issues of the people is still, for any government, it's still important. So it may be more important for us to, slightly streamline the way we put it rather than, getting, convincing them straight away. More importantly, as you said, actually, that when one source diminishes, there may be opportunities in other places. So I personally feel, actually, because since I'm also currently chairing the Asian Forum on Polar Sciences, there have been never better time, actually, that the Asian countries have been putting the resources and projects together for the cryosphere and climate-related research. So there should be more opportunities to use that the opportunity of collaboration as well as the intense activities there to think about how to take this forward. Instead of looking only one possibility, maybe multiple nodes or some that may be a way to take it possibly way forward. That's my just thought. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Tamban.
Does this one work? Yes. So I guess thinking about highlights from my week, I'm going to take a slightly different angle to what's been discussed so far, but I think what really stood out to me was kind of this ongoing theme that kept on coming up on just human connection. That was really highlighted in yesterday's plenary on storytelling, and I think reminding ourselves, especially when we're really kind of thinking about all this really highly technical science that a lot of us do, and connecting it back to us as humans and connection is super, super important. So I think that theme of storytelling yesterday was a really big highlight for me, to just bring it back to be like, why are we doing this? What do we need to remember? And what's kind of being forgotten from those kind of conversations? I guess a group of us hosted a workshop earlier on Monday, and that was kind of about ECR involvement in the IPY, in the next IPY, which was great. We kind of had a panel and managed to have some knowledge exchange from people who have been involved in the past IPY to get that information passed on to ECRs, which was really nice. And then we had a breakout group session after that, which was really good to kind of come up with some things. We're hoping to write a report from that, which will have it all in there, but there was a few things that came up that I'd just like to kind of state, which is something nice to take forward, I guess. So kind of one of the overarching themes from the workshop that connects to this kind of human element was that the success of the next IPY will depend as much on people, structures and ethics as on scientific ambition. And I guess to do that, though, to have diversity, continuity and excellence, it's not going to happen without structural investment. And the kind of overarching theme we came out with, or a vision, I guess, as ECRs from those discussions, was that this next IPY is a platform for societal change, not just scientific output. So yeah, that was kind of going forward. I think that's something to keep in mind, just that human connection going forward as well.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. Yeah.
Yeah, some key words for the forward suggestions. First, I think it's important to have a more united scientific community in the future. I think this CliC conference here is a very good example how the international scientists can be unified closer in the future. We have a lot of programs, organizations, but they all have different efforts. If we use more efficient way in the future to unify scientists worldwide, that will be a good way to adapt to the geopolitical changes. So that's one key word. Another key word is Earth system science. I think it's very important to integrate our different studies in a system approach. You say climate, cryosphere, they are different systems, or even larger system with the smaller systems. I cannot exactly express what is structure, climate, cryosphere, but talk about cryosphere, you have atmosphere, you have hydrosphere, you have ecosystems, of course, human society. So they are all linked. So if we want to really do something which is more influential for the whole society or for the policymakers, that would be more influential. Because if you talk to the policymakers, they think the ice is far away from them. And if talk to the society, if it's not in the Tibetan Plateau, Andes, or Arctic or Antarctic, it's still far away from that. If it's a kind of expression of system changes, that might be more influential. The another thing is about adaptation. I think it's for the changes of the cryosphere, something you cannot stop, but it's can be much more productive. Focus on adaptations. This morning we'll talk about how people are passively adapting to the changes. Changing clothes, change air conditioners. My city in Naish was no air conditioning before, but now they have to change. And that's a passive change, but we have some kind of more active changes, adaptive changes. And finally, I say AI is so powerful. It must be used for our cryosphere study in the future. I was talking with my colleagues, so we spent so many days driving in the field and access on the ice surface and monitor the sticks. If someday a robot can do that, of course you can also cooperate with local people. You don't need to go yourself there. And I think that must be a trend in the future. Of course, it costs a lot, but you can still try with the target in the future. Thank you.
Wonderful. So in our last 10 or so minutes before the closing, I'd love to open this up to the floor. Either a reflection, a thought about the way forward, where you would like to see CliC go, or just a direct question for the panel.
Thank you so much, and I just want to say this, of all the conferences I've been to, I think this has been the best one by far, for what it's worth. And being from Canada, I get the message a lot about interdisciplinary research. There's a lot of emphasis on engagement with indigenous communities as well. There's a challenge of representation there because they're often told, well, to go through the scientific system, you have to kind of shed your systems of traditional knowledge, and a lot of them are resistant to that. So then there ends up being this self-feeding cycle where they're not represented in the scientific community. And then there's the challenge of, well, how do you serve their interests then? So that's been a lot that's been going through my mind as well. But along with that, I'm seeing in Canada that there's a huge push toward applied interdisciplinary research, and it's been at the expense of fundamental research, unfortunately. And as far as a message that I would want to convey, you know, I often look longingly at the US and all the funding that's given to fundamental research, and we don't get that in Canada. And I would just want to say as a cautionary note looking forward that we don't view it as an either-or thing, that you're doing applied research, you know, we should all be interdisciplinary and forget about fundamental research. I mean, maybe I'm stating the obvious, but it's not obvious to the funding agencies. They need to be told that we need both. We need the people that go deep into the ice sheets, look at rheology, think about grounding lines and, you know, the water layers underneath, all of it, who go deep. And yes, we do need the people that engage with policy and with societal impacts. Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up on the previous comments and also, I mean, integrating with all that the speaker have said. 2 years ago, we have been doing a retreat with the European Polar Boards. And we were like 50 scientists thinking about the priorities for the next European calls on research. And we came to the same conclusions that right now, to reduce uncertainties, we should not focus on uncertainties, but on the gap of essential knowledge. So filling the gaps of observations means bringing up new technologies that allow us to gather those observations in challenging places, but critical for the understanding of the ice sheet processes. And so we try to push through the European Commission some tailored call dedicated only to the improvement of physics and not focusing on the policy outcomes, let's say, because this is what we need. I agree. I mean, without new observations, new understanding of the physics, we can just play with statistics, but not sure we can improve solidly our understanding.
Thank you. This might be an out-of-place question from a science and policy standpoint. So just as a background, I'm an engineer, so I'm going to ask it from an adaptation standpoint. So do you think there is a need to educate us with the climate science? Like for the past 4 days, we've been talking about the science and the changes. And we've heard about the policy part that we need to convince policymakers about the science. But a policymaker can misinterpret the science and ask, like, you know, this is how we should do things now. And us, being in the engineers, like, we're kind of, I'm a civil engineer, but a mechanical engineer would also have climate problems. But how do we adapt to that? Because it seems like, you know, between the climate scientists or the science itself and the policy, like, we're going to be taking the brunt of adjusting to it. A policymaker can tell us, do this. Climate scientists, not alarmists, I believe in the climate science, and I do that for my work in the Arctic. But if we get that wrong, at the end of the day, it's us who's going to be responsible. So I'm just curious, like, what are your views in terms of, like, how do we communicate that to the applied sciences, like for the engineers, to adjust to this reality, to put some certainty in the uncertainty that we know exists?
If you look at the basic problem has always been convincing a decision maker not to an engineer. Because for an engineer, it's an engineering problem. You know, you have a science issue, find solution to it. So communicating to engineers been so difficult, except like the kind of the new ideas which is coming for geoengineering ideas, which are the very large problem you think in a, the engineers can think it as a smaller problem and then try to approach the entire the full scale with a without the scaling of it. So I feel it's been always more difficult because unless you have funding, you don't really talk about to an engineer, isn't it? So to me, I feel that's not the real issue. The issue is actually about convincing actually there is a problem, and there is an urgency, and this is the time to do it. So I think there have been a lot of technology growing up so quickly. So once you have the kind of right funding, right people convinced about it, I personally feel it's not that difficult to convince an engineer. I don't know. I'm just thinking loud.
I also just have like a very quick comment on it, but I guess it comes down to just working with different groups of people, right? So if you are in a bubble of just engineers and you feel like all of that weight is on you, then maybe go and have a group of people that is more diverse so you can get multiple opinions and have those people around you you can ask those questions to and make sure you are working together on these problems, I guess.
Georgia mentioned the communicating science and not just, our publications. I'd like to ask the panel of any thoughts and ideas of how we can better communicate to a broader range of people and what the sort of be more creative and more innovative in our communication strategies.
I think it's a question which I was keeping in mind always because I'm just taking again example actually from my country. I'd also add to the reflection on the Canadian colleague was talking about. To communicate to the public, you need to understand what is the day-to-day problem rather than actually our larger scientific issues which we normally talk about it. Like communicating to a guy in the mountains, it's much easier when you talk about the kind of the hazards happening and what is its connection to this one. Communicating to somebody on the coastal areas with kind of the storm surges which is happening of late, increasing number of cyclones and all, become easier when you try to connect them to a larger climate thing. So it is important to, I think, we scientists are actually poor communicators. Let me be very clear, because we rather talk in terminologies which they don't really understand or they don't appreciate rather. So you need to involve the people actually who will be able to talk in the language and as well as the style which they understand, as well as they are immediately able to connect. For example, say 2018 severe weather as well as flooding in a down state of south of India actually really helped us to thereafter communicate with them much easier. Now they are any given small city, we are able to hold a small meeting and able to tell them actually what is its potential connection to the regional, global, and also on so thing. So if you unless until that from the services point of view comes, means the people are feeling the science what you do is for the requirement, they will never be probably convinced about it. So I feel that's the key, according to me.
We just finished our first phase of the second dependent plateau scientific expedition and research. We are now initiating the second phase. Our deputy director is here. I think they are organizing. Just a month ago, the president of Chinese Academy of Sciences visited our institute and offered a new program. And I think they'll hurry up to work on that. But I just talk about what we did at the first phase. We call that STEP. We have 4 components of the outcomes. The first is a report, not just paper, but write what you have observed. We have 10 tasks. Each task have a report. And you have individual reports based on that. So that's reports part. It's not paper publication, but report, like a book. So in that way, the data are more inclusive rather than topic-focused paper. It's much more broader. And another part is report to the government. We report what your scientific findings, what are the findings meaning for the managers. And then the different levels of government will reply to your reports. If you are interested, oh, this is interest. And we had more than 100 replies. That means they are happy with what you found, and they are happy to provide more findings in the future for you. And the third one is publication. For all the journals, we try as hard as we can to publish good papers. And the fourth one is outreach. Newspapers, WeChat, televisions. We have a special group of people work on that. Based on that 4 parts, we think that the program are well communicated with managers, with the scientists, with the society. And we have a very, it's not so formal, but the informal expression as managers are happy because they are funding you. Scientists are happy. You have published good results. And the society are happy. What you have found is provide something for their knowledge. Thank you.
I met with your comment, actually. I just want to introduce how we are doing in COFRI. So very similar to your institute, we also have a separate team for public. They are just working on a lot of PR materials, like sometimes we are using the broadcasting or YouTube and then article and everything. So that is just for, make us visible to the general public. Another route is actually for policymakers, because, they are very important for us, because anyway, we should need some kind of our resource from them. So like me, I'm a scientist, but I'm temporarily working for the Office for Policy. So I really spend a lot of time and effort to persuading our direct policymaker, which for us, like Ministry of Ocean and Fishery. And I also personally learned that it really requires a lot of efforts and time, but eventually we can, meet some kind of the understanding in some level. So I really think the young scientists especially may require some kind of the thinking about those approaches and spend some time to really make some connection with policymakers.
Thanks, Amelia. Georgia.
And sorry, just to jump in, because I think when you ask the question about how are engineers meant to be supported, I mentally just sat down the idea of like, oh, we've got another group of people that we need to communicate with on top of a quite long list at this point. Sometimes it can be really overwhelming, and I think more than our science, we're feeling that pressure of ensuring that everybody has access to information so that they can make the right decisions. But I think moving on to Helen's question and also the earlier comment around applied science, it feels like we're playing a bit of a waiting game at the moment. There's a real generational gap of people that were taught about climate change, and we need those people with the full awareness to come through the system, and for that to be the baseline instead of this group of people being the only knowledge holders. I think that's the in terms of communication approaches, there is not just one way, right? And that's why it can be a little bit overwhelming. It has to be at every single level, and each of those levels from wee kids that we're trying to ensure that they have everything they need to be prepared, so that as they get older and start to really understand the truth of the world, they're not terrified by it, they're empowered to act and respond and ultimately vote. And then at the top level, we're trying to address and mitigate the challenges facing us today. But there are a whole bunch of people in between that are making decisions right now, and without necessarily that support. So really, really good to hear that. And think about that and start to think about including that. But I hope at some point in the near future we're going to have a flush of rangatahi, our youth, come through that has a much better kind of state of knowledge than our broader community does at the moment. Kia ora.
That's great. A really nice way to end the panel discussion. That's really thinking about the future and the horizon. Just as we close this panel, I just want to remind everyone, CliC is here to serve the international cryosphere community, not the other way around. If you have an idea, you can log in and see the 14 working groups that CliC currently supports. We're looking for good ideas all the time. I remember 10 years ago, Ted Scambo's scrambling for some money to get some people together to start thinking about what became the International Thwaites Glacier project. Those are the kinds of things that CliC can help you get off the ground. We don't have a lot of resources in terms of real research dollars, but that's the kind of activity and coordination that we can offer. Also, including our junior faculty and early career researchers, there are always opportunities for leadership. Look for that on the CliC website. Opportunities to join the scientific steering group, for example. Wonderful experience. It looks great on your CV. It's good for everyone on the steering committee to have some new voices in the room. So just wanted to put that out there. So please join me in thanking an amazing panel. That was a great discussion. Peter, Peter Barrett, I know, did you want to say a quick word?
I guess I'm one of the older people here, and I've been very fortunate in the period that I've been part of the Antarctic community. But I have a concern that when I began, I was very lucky to be in the United States and did my PhD through the American program and also through the deep sea drilling project. But the world has changed. Then there were 12 treaty nations. Now there are 29 consultative parties. And while it's a continent of peace and science, I'm also concerned when I see the inability of our leaders to have the sort of dialogue that was envisaged at the time of the Antarctic Treaty, where the Soviet Union and the United States agreed that Antarctica should be a continent for peace and science. And I'm also concerned by the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists and their 89 seconds to midnight. So I know it's something that I find difficult to talk about openly, but I think this is my last chance. I just hope that, having had such a wonderful meeting here with the open discussions and cross-cultural discussions, there are still some people, Antarctic scientists, who aren't here, but who should be. And I'd like to feel that while our politicians and leaders seem unable to talk to each other, we can still talk together as scientists, all of us. And I know there'll be others who will be really trying to push this message through our leaders and politicians. And I just wish you all some success in the next few years, because if we can't, then, in my head, it's 50-50 between the nuclear exchange and climate change as to what's going to get us. I'd like to think we can actually, as a race, survive all of this. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks for those remarks. So let me just formally make sure that we acknowledge the panel. So please join me in thanking Amelia, Georgia, Tamban, Alex, Yao. Nice job.
Okay, well, those were two really rich and useful panel discussions. So I just want to add my thanks to Rob and Florence and the team on those panels. We will do some thanks in a minute, but I think first we are going to award some prizes for early career posters. So James Renwick, would you like to come up?
So, yes, some prizes. And just to give a bit of context, a lot of people have said what a great conference this has been, and I couldn't agree more. And I think a big reason for that has been the contribution by early career scientists, the energy they bring, the new ideas. It's just been wonderful to see graduate students and postdocs coming through who are doing all sorts of really cool things around the cryosphere. So a group of us got together to judge the early career scientist posters, just the posters. And we had a team of 9 doing this. It turned out to be a really hard thing to do because mostly they were excellent posters, and we engaged with these people and asked questions and got really sort of engaged in the conversation. So it was a hard job to draw up the list of the winners of these prizes, but we have come up with a top 3, and I think you're going to come up here, Ed. That would be a good idea. And is Megan, or Amy, sorry, Amy. Is Amy still here? No? Okay. But Ed's got the crucial items here. So, and I don't know if the people are still in the room, but the 3 posters we thought were really excellent, top marks, were from Jonathan Barsley, Jake Burstonowitz, and Alex Winter Billington. I don't know, any of you here? All down Courtney Place already, perhaps, who knows? Anyway, those 3, and I think they were all on the Tuesday poster session, as I recall. Fantastic work, but you could give an award to just about all of the early career posters, and for that matter, all of the early career oral presentations as well. So congratulations to you all, and we'll distribute these prizes, which is a gift card and a little certificate to each of you. So thanks very much for that.
Yeah, thanks, James. And thought it was a bit rough that there's no, oral award for the best ECRs, because there were some wonderful talks as well. But no, that's great. A lot of work goes into those posters. And okay, we just thought we might just take this time just to make a few thank yous.
I've had a wonderful time, both in seeing research, but probably more so in connecting with people and meeting new people. I hope you all had as wonderful of a time as I did. It was a pleasure to host people here in Wellington and to have such perfect weather for the week for it. So thanks for coming.
So, I'd like to thank all the local organisers, the Indigenous and local communities here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. Obviously, Tim and Lauren have been a big part of the local organisation. I'd like to thank all the IPO staff from CliC as well, who've done a tremendous amount of work. So particularly Katie, who's not unable to be here in person, but also Megan and Keith as well. So they've done a tremendous amount of work. And I'd like to thank everyone for coming who's presented as well. And I'm sure I've missed someone out. That's why I'm trying not to mention too many people by name. But our sponsors, who've already been mentioned before, but there's been a tremendous level of financial backing for this conference from a very wide variety of countries and institutions, and I think that just merits acknowledging again. And we really couldn't have done this without a huge amount of effort from a lot of people and a lot of institutions. So to everyone who's been involved in organising this, I would just like to say a massive word of thanks on behalf of CliC. Thank you.
So don't go. Yeah, but thank you. Got some gifts. I think just down here. Do you want to grab them now? There's always a lot of people who put an event together like this, and many of them you won't have met. They work really hard behind the scenes. They put in an effort that's way over and above their day job. And we just want to acknowledge a few key people. Firstly, in the IPO, so just building on what Ed and Rob said, and hopefully they're in the room. We know one of them's not. Katie Quigley is not here, but she is the communications officer at the IPO. And she's a lot of the cool graphics you see, the website, all the comms, and the presentation, the designs are all thanks to Katie. So we've got a gift for Katie, which someone will take back to UMass. But Katie Quigley, thank you for your efforts for this conference. Okay, now I hope you're here, Megan, because Rob's already called you out, but Megan Taylor, come up here, Megan. Megan has been a stalwart. She has just done so much leading up to this conference and during the week here. And Megan, you know, from the program, from working with the conference organising company, from dealing with me and the local organising committee, just big thanks for everything you've done. Thanks, Phil. And every IPO has a great leader. And in the case of CliC, Keith Alverson, would you please come up? Keith has also run the team, done an enormous amount from the beginning of really the IPO, of thinking about this conference, of convincing me to host it in Wellington. And Keith, we just want to thank you for all of that and the sponsorship efforts you put in. So thanks very much, okay? And certainly, last but certainly not least, I hope, is Dow Polseri in the audience? Now, Dow, are you in the audience? Please come up here, Dow. Dow works at the Antarctic Research Centre, and she has many, many different things she's juggling at the moment. And about 12 months ago, I said, Dow, I think we're going to host a conference. And we pulled it off. And it's much of that is thanks to you, Dow. So huge amount of work behind the scenes. Not only the conference, the side events, the Falls meeting. Wonderful, Dow. Thank you for all that extra effort. Okay, so let's wrap things up. You know, I really want to build on some of the... I don't want to spend too long talking about it, but I just want to acknowledge some of the great comments and thank you for them. I've been hearing them all week, and they relate to the diversity that has been at this conference. They relate to the really great human connections and conversations. They relate to respectful conversations. And I think the format has perhaps been a little uncomfortable, but it's good to be sort of slightly out of your comfort zone sometimes. Hearing and talking about things that you don't necessarily deal with in your day-to-day life, and we intentionally set it up like that. We set it up to have these discussions in the morning. So I really, right now, want to acknowledge those plenary speakers and those people who led those panels and did a bit of work to think about it beforehand, and that makes the panels go so well. And we've had some really rich and brilliant discussions. So thank you to those who are in the panels. Round of applause. And just thank you for bringing your energy, bringing your open mind, and your enthusiasm for the science. I think CliC's in pretty good shape. I think our community's in pretty good shape. We've clearly got some big challenges, but I think we're up for those challenges, and we'll see you in another 10 years. So thank you very much. Very important we finish the conference off the way we began.
If you were here at the beginning, you will remember that we opened with a Karakia, and what Karakia did was it brought us together as one group. No religion in it, nothing like that. It was just an agreement that we will be together as one group. And so that we all don't take each other home, now I'm going to separate us all. I'm going to say a very short Karakia in Māori, and then I'm going to say it in English so that you know what I've said. This is my favourite karakia. Ahi kā ki uta, ahi kā ki tai, kia horahora, purapura o ahi kā ki roto o te ao marama. Let your home fires be seen inland, let your home fires be seen along the coast, and may the sparks from your home fires rise up and be seen throughout the world. Kia ora.